Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description and every episode description to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say I'm watching so-and-so show, and then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it, and that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic, one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. One mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about part 3 of HBO's True Detective. And I thought this episode really leaned into the detective portion of the show's title as we watch Danvers and Navarro use their respective detective skills. I love that internal rhyme there, respective detective skills, to learn about Annie K and the Salal researchers. I love a good detective show. I think the current iteration of Perry Mason on HBO is great. I'm really enjoying Monsieur Spade, which is very similar to Perry Mason over on AMC Plus as well. But what propels this show, I think, beyond those two, at least for right now, is how it incorporates the supernatural into what is otherwise a very a fact-based line of work. I love watching shows or films with cops whose entire lives revolve around only drawing conclusions from tangible evidence, being forced to reckon with a bunch of inexplicable shit happening. The success of this marriage of detective work and the supernatural is going to rely heavily on sticking the landing, explaining what all is going on. But this show has done, and I think will continue to do, a lot of interesting things with having two cops with conflicting belief systems working on this case. And if you've been a fan of this channel for at least the year of 2023, you know I've also really enjoyed all of these Native American stories that have been on TV and in film as of late. And I'm going to really enjoy seeing how that also is incorporated into a murder mystery show. It's working really well on the criminally underrated Dark Winds, also on AMC Plus. Also with Monsieur Spade, not with this. But hopefully True Detective will make more fans of this genre, and folks will check out Dark Winds as well. That's a joy on AMC Plus, and it's an easy watch. It's 2 seasons so far, 6 episodes apiece, I think. You can get through it, worth the watch. But lastly, before I talk about this episode specifically, I'm enjoying how this show is kind of like slowly unraveling the details of the town's history. Like, they're giving me just enough to keep me engaged, but not too much or too little. And I'm appreciating that. And I think that's where I want to start, because I think most of the interesting bits of information come from little hints that this episode dropped about the town's past, as well as the past between some of the individual inhabitants, namely Navarro and Danvers. And this episode opens with Navarro going to arrest Annie K for trespassing and destruction of property at the mines, but she's met with a live water birth and is immediately thrust into assisting. Of note, the woman actually in the process of giving birth in this scene is like, yo, what's this bitch doing here? And you know a motherfucker don't like you if they call you a bitch in the middle of pushing out a child. But this is interesting to me though, right? Because Navarro, she's supposed to be one of them, right? This is her people. But she's a cop, and her job is to protect the mine. Now here she is coming to arrest one of her own people, and already, while already having a reputation that precedes her as a bitch. Like, later in this episode, when Kavik wants to trade info for info with her, we learn that Navarro's mom, Navarro, and her sister Jules returned to Alaska from Boston to escape her abusive father. But then her mother began to exhibit a lot of the behavioral characteristics that Jules is showing right now before she up and disappeared. What's the connection between all this and Annie K? I don't know yet, but I'm excited to see how the show is going to tie it together, and I'm pretty confident that they are going to do that. There's just a lot that they're putting out there, and it's one of those things where like I'm sure the show is encouraging you to theorize and to look for everything. I'm not gonna do all that. I often find that when I over theorize, I find myself disappointed with a not necessarily simple result, but with something that's just not as batshit crazy as what I concocted in my head. So I kind of just roll with what I see, and I don't look too deeply, but I do feel like this show is putting a lot out there for everybody to theorize about, and particularly to theorize about how these things are connected. So, meanwhile, in present day, because this scene with Navarro and Annie K is obviously a flashback, a search party led by Hank and a bunch of, like, Cletus the slack-jawed yokel motherfuckers, they're off to find Clark, who we learned at the end of episode 2 is not among the frozen researchers. I don't think the show is being too subtle here with Hank trying to cover up something, so I'm going to go ahead and say that Hank is clearly trying to cover up something. We've seen plenty of evidence that he knows more than he admits. This week we learned that he got an anonymous tip about a guy named Oliver Tagak, an engineer at Salal Station who skipped town right before Annie was killed and that he completely ignored and buried. When confronted about this, he basically... his response, which is befitting somebody who looks and behaves like them, is to basically just unimaginatively call Annie K and Danvers sluts and accuses Danvers of trying to seduce his son, which results in coffee in the face. I did like the Miss Robinson reference, and then Pete not getting the reference. I thought that was kind of funny, but yeah, classy guy, Hank. He's also not at all subtle about his desire to kill Clark when he finds him, given the fact that, again, he's brought these fucking January 6th insurrectionists he brought them motherfuckers from Fargo over to Alaska to do this search for Clark, and then says very directly that he doesn't want Clark alive. Danvers takes a different approach to finding Clark, deciding that her and Navarro are going to go through 19 boxes of evidence that they collected from that trailer that her and Navarro found last week, and that Pete was just going to learn how to hack phones because that's just what he does because he's young. He just learns that. Aside from learning that Annie and Clark had been dating secretly for a while, they learned that someone else knew about them and figure out that this woman named Susan, she's the woman who dyed Annie's hair. They figured it was Susan based on that same dye being on one of the photos. Susan is the one who tells them about this Oliver Tagak guy who I mentioned earlier. And in another example of how different types of detective work can have different results, Pete determined that this Oliver guy just didn't exist because he had no digital footprint. And Navarro found out exactly where he was and that he was a nomad via Muckluck Telegraph, which I assuming is just a fancy way of saying walking around and asking motherfuckers questions. But slightly disappointing, I think, is the lack of info we got from Oliver. I was hoping for a little bit more there. The biggest bit of information we got from Oliver isn't really information. It's the way he reacted when he was told that the researchers were dead. They said like, oh yeah, the researchers at Salal are dead. He's like, Lund is dead? I'm like, why do you always specifically care about that one guy? And it just so happens to be the one who's alive despite basically only being a torso at this point. Like, that's interesting to me. And he also pokes at Navarro about not knowing her native name, which again is interesting because how does he know that she doesn't know her native name? Or maybe it's just a tradition that if you meet one of your own, you introduce yourself with that name, and since she didn't do that, he knew. But whatever the case may be, I'm interested in seeing how much all of Navarro's people just don't like her. And I'm curious to figure out why. She seems okay to me. The last major thing that I want to talk about is the supernatural experiences that Navarro has in this episode. The first thing's fairly minor. I can't even really make sense of it. It just seems like it might have just been a spooky thing to make you go, oh shit. And then but whatever it is, she finds an orange on the ice, presumably dropped by one of the slack-jawed yokels. She throws it, and then it comes right back to her. And I don't know, I guess we're supposed to assume that a ghost threw it back. I don't know, but they didn't give me enough there to really give a shit. Now, I don't think it's entirely pointless or anything like that. Just in that moment, I just don't think there's anything really that we could derive from it. I could be tripping. Maybe you guys got something other than a ghost threw it back to put in the comments. But that's all I'm getting from it right now. It'll probably make more sense. Probably make more sense later, though. Speaking of later, something we can make sense of happens when Navarro slips on the ice and hits her head on it, though. So she has a brief vision of a place, no snow, sunny out, so it's obviously not anytime present. Appears to be warm, daylight. Looks like, I think when I looked at it, it looked like it might have been the scene of an accident. And a small child's hand rests on her shoulder, and it says, "Tell mommy." And we don't see the face of the child who's doing that, but we do see that the child's holding a small polar bear stuffed animal, which is the same stuffed animal we saw Danvers, and I'm just going to say it's her son playing with in that flashback last week. So I guess we can assume that this hand that's on Navarro's shoulder is Danvers' dead son's hand. What does he want Navarro to tell Danvers? Let me know what you think in the comments. Also related to Danvers' past, Pete asks Danvers about what happened between her and Navarro. She tells this story, this guy named William Wheeler, who they were never able to successfully arrest for beating his wife. She never pressed charges, always let it slide. Eventually, he does end up killing her. Liz says that when her and Danvers arrived on the scene, both Wheeler and his wife were dead, murder-suicide. However, while she's doing this narration, telling this story to Pete, we are seeing a visual flashback of the moment, and when she arrives, the guy Wheeler is still very much alive, letting us know that it is in fact one of them, presumably Danvers or Navarro, that kills him in that moment. Further, shout out to the closed captioning for telling me that when she walked up, he was whistling Twist and Shout, which my ears wouldn't have picked up on normally because I saw it on the screen. I listened for it, and I'm like, that don't sound like Twist and Shout to me, but whatever. Very important. I think a case can be made for either of them having shot this guy. Danvers seems to hate people enough to put a bullet in a piece of shit woman beater who was evading justice. She also has a tendency to lose her shit. Look what she did with that drunk driver in episode 1. Navarro has proven to have a very kind of like black and white approach to like crime assessment. Like she chastises Danvers in this episode for not readily putting two and two together that Hank is involved in this situation with Annie because of all the mines and stuff like that. All the mines. I made it sound like it was World War II because of the mines. And Danvers point out how she's kind of like rushing to judgment. She's like, yo, 2 + 2 is 4, my guy. Like, it's obvious. So it's conceivable that Navarro, given that her mom was beaten by a man as well, could just have a very black and white view of what happened. Like, he beat the shit out of his wife. She came back, beat the shit out of his wife to the point of death. She arrives and he's still alive, talking shit, whistling. She might have just popped him right there, and that would be that. And her, it's 2 + 2 is 4. He deserved it. I did it. Done and done. But whoever killed him, it's clear now that whatever took place in that room was enough to lie about, and the secret is at least a portion of what's driving them apart. I want to close by talking about the final scenes with Lund and Annie's phone, and then give a couple of thoughts. So Danvers and Navarro go to question Lund. Like I said, he's basically just a torso at this point. In between screams, he tells Danvers that they woke her and that she's out there on the ice. Nothing new here, although it would be interesting if he was talking about someone other than Annie. But more on that in a moment, because I kind of jumped on the Annie is like supernaturally coming back from the dead thing in episode 1. I'm not on that shit no more. But like I said, in a moment. And when Danvers leaves the room, his voice, his being Lund's voice then changes into a demonic one, and he tells her that her mother is saying hi and is waiting for her. Like I mentioned earlier, we learned that the mom was behaving just like Jules before she disappeared. And in this episode, Jules disappears as well, albeit briefly. And still, the idea that messages are being passed through Lund is troubling enough, but that one sounded like a threat. And I feel like he probably died right after that. And it also doesn't bode well for Jules' future either, that she could be potentially following in the footsteps of her mother. Now, like I said, I mentioned a moment ago, it would be interesting if the she was not Annie. And I kind of assumed, like I said, after the first 2 episodes, like she was on some kind of revenge tour over something that one of the researchers, if not all of them, had done to her. But we now know that she was happy in this relationship with Clark. And once Pete unlocked her phone, we learned that she was looking for something, which she found, that ultimately resulted in like 8 million consecutive screams, presumably before her death as well, and the removal of that tongue. Maybe her and Clark and others were looking into some past woman and doing some weird ritualistic shit and woke that woman, and she killed Annie back then, and then for whatever reason later killed the researchers as well, except for the ones who wore her symbol, Clark and Lund. I don't know, again, just guessing. I also wonder if this person, if they exist, is someone that we know. Like, are they affiliated with Navarro's mom and sister, or through that branch of whatever's going on with them? Is this person somehow affiliated with that? Is this person maybe Rust or Travis Cole affiliated? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments as to just if you think that this is someone other than Annie. Because again, I don't even know the presumption should be that it's Annie. I made that leap in episode 1. I don't feel confident about that at all right now. But if you think it's someone other than her that killed the researchers, or in this case scared them to death, let me know who you think it is in the comments. And now I'm going to close with a couple quick thoughts. The stuff with Danvers and Leah I thought could have been better this week. More examples of Danvers not approving of Leah's behavior and being a kind of shit mother. I got enough examples of that now. Let's dive deeper into the why and the aftermath from it. I don't need any more examples. We're 3 episodes in now. I also thought this whole stillborn baby thing that they did in this episode, I felt like it was a little bit muddy, kind of unclear. Like, Leah finds out that a couple had a stillborn baby, likely due to the bad water because of the mines. That's probably also what caused the baby in the opening scene flashback to struggle to breathe when it was born, but they had Annie at that time to save it, and Annie's now dead. This baby was born in an Annie-less world, dies. Leah informs Danvers of this, and then Danvers later goes to a ceremony, I guess, for this stillborn baby, like a funeral or something like that. But the problem is, it's really unclear that that's what she was doing. Like, she also gets a lot of nasty looks at this event, which would have made more sense to me if I had known what event she was at. But I only know now because I searched the internet for it. I'm like, what the fuck? Because I even had it in my notes. I'm like, I don't get, what is this scene about? Like, I watched the scene a second time, and by the way, I watched the whole episode a second time because Sunday night, when this aired, after the Lions' defeat, I was just not all together there. I tried to watch the episode, and then I woke up the next day, and I was like, you just weren't really focused. And I don't know, it took me out of it. So I needed this extra day to kind of just come to grips with the Lions season ending. So that's why this was a little bit late. But anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, like I said, I had to search the internet for it. I watched the scene again, the episode a second time, and I was looking. I was like, is there anything that I can identify as this having to do with that stillborn baby? And no one says anything. There's just like chanting. She comes in, she gets some nasty looks, and then she goes to the bathroom, splash some water on her face. And I'm like, I don't know what the point of the scene is. So I had to look that up on the internet because I'm just like, I don't know. So I feel like that was a little bit messy. I'm also curious if the issues with Pete and his wife relative to how he just acquiesces to Danvers all the time are going to become more important as well. That's another one where, okay, I'm getting more examples of it. Let's see where that's going. Finally, we learn from Pete's veterinarian cousin that everyone likely died of cardiac arrest, and he's seen this before with Caribou running and dying of fright, which ties in with the season's opening scene. It ties the opening scene to present day as well, so we can presume that the Caribou saw whoever this person is and just said that they were ready to end it all rather than fuck with her. So all in all, though, the show's rolling along. Really compelling characters and history in this town. Creepy setting. It's dark all the time. Supernatural occurrences. A captivating murder mystery. Gonna be a pretty tough one for this one to falter. I'll see you guys next week for episode 4, hopefully on time. There's no Lions games anymore, so I have nothing to be remorseful or sad over and need an extra day for. So hopefully I will see you guys next Monday to talk about episode 4. And until then, peace.